Okay, so somebody just asked me, because I'm a massive fan of Doctor Who, why do people like it? Why has it been around so long? What's it all about? All right, so anyway, Doctor Who is a British show that was started in 1963 by a Canadian, a woman, and a homosexual Indian guy. They have this thing called the Tea Time Hour, and that's usually like an hour that's reserved for kid shows, right? Because kids like tea. I guess they do in England. So they were like, hey, we need something for this tea time hour. And so this Canadian guy, he comes in and he's like, hey, sci-fi is all the rage. They had a woman producer named Verity Lambert, and he said, hey, you go give me a science fiction thing. So they were like, all right, we'll have this guy who can travel anywhere in time and space. And what we'll do is we'll educate kids about history in science. And then they cast this guy who was real surly. His name was William Hartnell. He was the first Doctor, right? And he'd only been in like military movies. He always played like police and army guys, and he was real harsh and stuff. And they're like, okay, so you are gonna be this guy called the Doctor. You're super mysterious. You're gonna travel through time and space, and we're gonna teach kids about science and stuff. And the Canadian guy who created it was like, hey, I don't want any crazy monsters on this thing. He was like a real sci-fi purist. Like he was into that, one of those hard science people that like, hey, you know, I don't want to read your science fiction unless I know how the bathrooms work. So they said, okay. And so then they did some episodes where they went back to cavemen times, and then they went and hung out with Marco Polo, and then they kind of realized like, oh, right, like educating kids in an entertaining fashion is like super hard. So let's throw in some monsters in this thing, right? So then they threw in these things that literally look like a pepper shaker, and they had a big stalk coming out of their face. And those are called Daleks, and all they want to do is exterminate everything. They're an allegory for Nazis. Suddenly the show took off, right? Like it was huge. It was as big as the Beatles. And so they're like, great, we got a hit. More monsters, right? And so then like the Doctor started traveling through space and time, and then William Hartnell started getting old and was real sad, and the producers didn't like him anymore. And they're like, should we end the show? And they said, no, this thing, they're selling toys and all sorts of stuff. So like, let's keep this show going. We'll just put in a different actor, right? But they didn't even be like, hey, let's put in a guy that looks like the guy. We're gonna just put in a new dude, right? And say, hey, whenever this doctor guy is horribly injured, he turns into another guy. I mean, he's still the same guy, but he's always gonna look completely different. And they were like, well, that's not gonna work. And they said, well, who cares? Let's try it. And guess what? It worked, right? And so then a new guy was the Doctor, right? And the show kept going. And then people were losing interest. I mean, basically, this is a show where like, every few years it should absolutely be canceled, and then they change like one thing about the show and suddenly everyone's back on board, because really you can go anywhere in time and space. So like the second Doctor goes through, and then they're like, we gotta cancel this thing, we're done. And then they go, well, you know what, let's put it in color and see what happens. And suddenly Doctor Who's in color, everybody's like, I'm back in. And then it almost got canceled again. And then they said, well, what do you want to do? We should cancel. And they go, well, what if we get some guy and just put a real long scarf around his neck? And he'll talk real low. And they're like, that is never going to work. But they tried it, and then suddenly everyone's like, we love Doctor Who again. And so then that guy ends up doing it for 11 years, right? And then it's like super popular. Now it's coming to America, and everyone's like, we all like British shows. Like, we don't like it when the British rule us, but we do like it when they send us their entertainment, because it makes us feel smarter. You know, it's kind of a La La Land situation where, you know, Ryan Gosling loves jazz, and it's hard to explain to people why you love jazz, because a part of the reason why you love it is just because you have something over people. So like me, I love all this British stuff because it makes me feel like slightly superior. Black books, you don't know what that is. Or the IT crowd, you don't know what that is, but guess what, I do, it's great. The thing about liking sci-fi stuff is back in the old days, before the world changed, you'd get beat up for liking that stuff, but then you'd find other people that were also getting beaten up, and then you'd be like, hey, let's hang out and talk about stuff because we're both getting beat up, and then you create bonds of friendship, create your own language, and it's all this Doctor Who language, so that you're sitting there like, Jesus Christ, should I mine for this gold? I would hate to do it if I was a Cyberman, right? You don't know what that reference, well, some of you might know what that reference is, and be like, as far as Cybermen jokes go, pretty weak. But yeah, so anyway, Doctor Who went on from 1963 to like 1989 with 26 years. It just became one of those things like, you know, like a piece of furniture where it's just like it's there. And then you're like, someone should throw this away. And everyone's like, we'll get to it. And then they finally did. And then it disappeared for years and years, all through the 90s. They call it the wilderness years. But people liked it so much, they were writing books and doing audio plays about it and actually making their own movies. Because it's weird, over in England, if I was to be like, I really liked Hill Street Blues, and I'm gonna do my own fan movie, I couldn't do it. Like, some lawyer would come in and be like, hey man, no way, unless you got permission. But the thing about it is, for characters in Doctor Who, whoever the writer was for the episode, they give the permission to use those characters or those monsters. Or you can just go up to the actors and be like, hey, you wanna do my Doctor Who fan film? And they go, yes. And that's what they did, and that's how it kept going. And then all these fans got together and said, hey, you know, it'd be great, let's do some Doctor Who for New Generation. And then they did it, and everybody was like, oh, this is great, we like it. And then very first season, they kill their doctor, and it was like, whoa. And then they bring in some other guy who's like super handsome, and all the girls are like, whoa, what is this Doctor Who thing? Because like before, all the doctors have been kind of, well, I wouldn't say great looking, but you know, pretty ugly. I mean, one or two exceptions. And now it's become this global phenomenon, and people like Doctor Who because it's like a piece of furniture that you're just too tired to throw away.